All right, and we are live. Thank you, Kat.
All right. I'm excited to be with all of you again, even if it is virtually. Yeah, glad to be here. And I'm going to share my screen. Let's see if I need your permission. I need your permission, Cindy, to share the screen.
Okay.
You know how to do that?
That hasn't happened before, but
I think there's.
Okay, here we go. How about now?
Let me try it now. Yes. Okay, perfect. I am going to be monitoring the chat. Where to go? I need to see that too. Okay, I'm going to be monitoring the chat on another computer. So feel free, please ask questions. If you would like, please, if you have like ideas of things that you have done that you'd like to share, please do so. If there's things that you say, I'm not quite sure how that would work because of X, please let me know as well. I really want to make sure that this is interactive. So please go ahead and do that. Here's the bit.ly. Actually, I should probably, you guys can put that bit.ly in there. It's on just about every slide as well, so you can access it a little bit later also. All right, so I actually found some pictures of Pixley, of some students in Pixley. And the reason I made this slide is because I know that in the past, the way that we, as teachers, monitored our students, how they were learning and, you know, helped to guide our instruction, we physically saw them, right? And so we, here, technology is being used in these images, but kids are doing a lot more than that. And so as teachers, it was simple because we had that proximity and we could walk around and see how things were going. And so the challenge now is that we are essentially, our students are looking at a device and we can't see them all the time. And so things have certainly changed. And so Hyperdocs are something that began before these school closures and need for distance learning all of a sudden came about. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about not only how Hyperdocs are a great pedagogical strategy in many ways and really aligned to some of the UDL principles we've been talking about, but as they were developed originally, many of them, there are some adjustments that we'll need to make. And so I'll be kind of talking a little bit about that and how that will work because we are in a little bit of a different environment. So, you know, what I like about those images, rather than a computer, is that we have students working with one another, shaking hands, writing on desks, not just on computers. So I think that what's really important, you'll see, you know, you have students like looking at each other's work on the bottom picture. So I think the key is, as much as possible, we want to keep those connections with this distance learning environment. And so I'm kind of going to talk about how we can do that because it's really important that that kids still feel a connection to us, their teachers, as well as for their sorry, I'm reading the chat at the same time, as well as with each other. So anyway, perfect. Bit.ly is a link to Amazon. My guess is that that is either an L or an I or whichever. If the link is not working for anyone, if anyone did get the link, if you could maybe let us know in the chat. Otherwise, you know what I can do too, is I can just put it in the chat right now as well. That will work. So let me go to the chat. Let's see if this helps. All right, let's try that. Let me know if it didn't work. Capital I at the end. Okay. All right. Okay. Okay, and I put that link in there as well, so that should work also. And thanks for using the chat for that. So Hyperdocs, a little background on what that is. Hyperdocs are essentially a way to leverage Google Apps in a way that engages students with content and allows them to collaborate and give some open-ended opportunities for showing their learning for their teacher. So Hyperdocs were developed by, oh, perfect, it works. The link. So Hyperdocs were developed by Lisa Highfill, Kelly Hilton, and Sarah Landis. There's a picture of them. They wrote a book called the Hyperdoc Handbook, and they're super helpful people. So just kind of wanted to give you a background on that. If you're interested in learning more about that, that's a book that you can access. And then of course, I'll have a lot of links on here as well that you can look at as well, including their website and such. Okay, there we go. So what are Hyperdocs? So this is according to their website. They say transformative, interactive, that replaces worksheet method of delivering instruction, and that it's an agent in a blended learning classroom. So if you think about blended learning, the idea of blended learning is that the technology itself is not responsible for teaching the child. Like there is still a strong need for a teacher. There is still a strong need for teachers working with students in small groups, while other students are maybe working independently for enrichment and accessing more content on the technology. But the idea is the teacher is still very actively involved. And so I think that's important. And I think it's also important that the word is interactive. So this is not a passive opportunity for students. It's actually something that is interactive as well. So here, this is taken from their website as well. So what Hyperdocs are and what they are not. So take a look at that for a moment. I know you can all read. I won't read it to you. And you'll notice on the bottom left, I circled that. Because I think that that's really important, that we can use Hyperdocs as our how in distance learning, but that it's important that we use those to allow students to create, collaborate, think critically, and connect. I think especially right now, I know even for me as an adult, being an extrovert, it's been really hard to be isolated. So we do like Zoom, I have like Zoom meetups with my with some of my family members and such. But this is, you know, for our students as well. They're not seeing their peers. They're not seeing you as teachers. And so I think it's really important that we do all that we can to make sure that there's a connection there. And to make sure that this is a collaborative opportunity for them. And I do believe that Hyperdocs can help with that. So if you consider that a Hyperdoc, originally Hyperdocs were in Google Docs format, but you'll find now that there's a lot of hyper slides. So it's the same concept, except people are using slides instead of docs. So I may say Hyperdocs, I may say hyper slides, but really they're kind of interchangeable depending on what format, what app you choose to use. And you'll see examples of both. So we want students to collaborate either on docs or on slides. Do you think we should share a collaborative doc or slide deck? So have all our students on a shared doc or slide. This is something that's done in traditional, so to speak, in face-to-face classrooms quite a bit, very effectively. So my question to you guys is, do you think that's a good idea in a distance learning environment? You guys can, you can talk in the chat if you like. And you may or may not agree with me. So Cindy's saying definitely, okay?
I think so.
Okay. So we have some yeses.
Well, even if you allow them to and then guide them on what is appropriate and what is not appropriate within that Google slide or doc.
Yes, that would be very
That's also learning.
Yes, yes. Okay. Some students participating with a Hyperdoc. Okay. And Courtney, is that one Hyperdoc they're all working on, or do they each have their own copy? Awesome. I think it depends on also on what you have done with your classroom already. So if your students, when they were face-to-face with you, are used to using collaborative docs and slides, you're probably not going to have a lot of problems. You already have some of those expectations set, everything's ready. But if you're someone that hadn't really done that yet, I'm not sure that I would recommend it right off the bat, because it's difficult to manage all of the version histories and such if the students, perhaps maybe our elementary, younger elementary students and such, if the students aren't as comfortable with the platform, it can get a little messy. And so if you have done this in your classroom a lot and your students are comfortable with it, I say awesome. Like, that's great. And I would definitely recommend you keep doing that. But if you are a teacher that has not yet started this and you're starting Hyperdocs or Hyperslides for the first time, and it's difficult for you to like get those expectations out to them, it may be helpful to, make a copy for each student of that Hyperdoc or Hyperslide, and then we still want them collaborating. So then maybe have them do their collaboration, lead in that Hyperdoc or Hyperslide to a more manageable collaboration platform, such as like Google Classroom's Create Question, or for perhaps going to Flipgrid and things like that. So Jim's saying, sometimes students will accidentally delete stuff. Right. So again, like if you've got kids that you've already done this a lot in the classroom and it's working for you, please continue. But what I don't want is teachers that haven't started this in this time where we're having to shift everything that we're doing, the way that we deliver instruction and collect information and give feedback. Try something that doesn't work, and then you get frustrated, and it's a lot at once, right? So kind of like those baby steps for those that need it, which is fine because we're all at a certain point. So that's one thing I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit. So I think this is a strategy for lesson, for computer science lessons, actually. It's called Use, Remix, Create. And so the idea in computer science is, as I'm learning a coding language, whether it's block coding, it's Java, it's Python, whatever, first, I use an already made program and I look at the code and I kind of analyze it, right? So I'm learning, what is this, right? So for those that haven't used Hyperdocs yet, sometimes it can be helpful to try it with one that's already created. That may feel a little less overwhelming, and it will help you to decide, how can I then take this and now remix it? That's the next step. So now how can I take this pre-created Hyperdoc and how can I modify it for my needs? And so in coding, what that is, okay, I saw this code. If I change some things, how's it going to change the program, right? And so that's that next step, is remixing. And you may be at one, or, we all might be at different levels of this, and that's okay. But I think this is helpful because if you jump straight into the create stage and you're not quite sure how this is going to work, it may be a lot more difficult, and it'll be a real steep learning curve. And so to kind of and the learning might not be as well sustained for you. So it can be helpful to think about this first. Use, remix, create type concept as we're going through this. So I wanted to kind of talk about that, and also understanding that because everybody's in a different spot as far as technological proficiency, that wherever you fit in here is going to be okay, because you need to go to the place where you are going to grow the most. And that means you have to be at a place, like we have to meet you where you are at in this process. So that being said, I'm going to give you some time to explore some pre-made Hyperdocs. And as you're exploring them, I'd like you to keep in mind And then we'll come back together and I'll show you some other things and show you ways of creating your own and things to think about, creating simple ones at the beginning especially. But as you explore these Hyperdocs, what I want you to do is consider what remixes you would make. Because many times when you look at these Hyperdocs, it will say something, and yes, there will be templates, Fidel, as well. So you'll be able to look at templates. And that's actually a great way to kind of like go between remix and creating, right? Because you have a template and you're putting your things in there. Absolutely. So as you're looking at these Hyperdocs, you may see things that say to the students that are going through the Hyperdoc, talk to your partner. Okay, well, that may not work if students aren't all online at the same time, or if they get to that part of the Hyperdoc when they're already offline, whatever it happens to be. And so those of you that are not able to get to the slide deck, make sure that that is an I, uppercase I, instead of an L. So think about how you could change that. If the prompt is go talk to your group in the Hyperdoc, or go talk to a partner, could you perhaps use a Flipgrid, right? Flipgrid is a free video conversation platform. If the Hyperdoc says, I want you to draw a picture or make a sketch of this scientific model or whatever it may be, could you have students go to perhaps even a collaborative document, or go to like Google Classroom and have them upload a picture, right? Could they still draw and then upload a picture of their drawing using that webcam feature in Docs or Slides? And another way that you could encourage that collaboration in this environment is the create question feature of Google Classroom. So, and if you're not quite sure about those features, we can talk a little bit more about that, and I can show you some videos and how-tos on that. But I just want you to kind of think about how you would take the good parts of these Hyperdocs, which include some collaboration opportunities, and think about how can I just kind of remix it to be a digital platform, if that makes sense. So I want to give you some time to actually explore some of these resources and some of these Hyperdocs, because I think it's important for you to have some time to kind of look through these before we come back together and think about how this fits in with what we've been talking about in Pixley as far as lesson design and UDL and such. And so there are some resources here. This one is called Teachers Give Teachers. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what these resources are, and then I'll give you a bit of time to explore. This one that says Teachers Give Teachers on the top left is Hyperdocs searchable that are created by other teachers. So if I go here to, and I go to take one because I want to actually explore one, and I write, say, grade 1. There's going to be, now you see it's like, okay, a lot of these aren't even grade 1, right? Okay, so the search is a little weird. So maybe instead I'll say, okay, I know, I want to look up like, ancient Egypt, because that's the topic that we're doing right now. Okay, so now here's some that I can look at. So maybe I'll click on this one, and it's this Hyperdoc. I'm gonna make a copy that's already made by another teacher. In a moment, it's thinking. Okay, so, you know, there are things for students to do on this Hyperdoc. If you like it, you can make a copy of it and send it to your kids. If there's things you want to change it, right? But this just kind of gives you some ideas on what it is. So, you know, there's things that you can do in this. Sometimes in these Hyperdocs that are already done, there's like links to a Google form that you don't have access to or whatever, but it still gives you a lot of good ideas. So that's one of the features, or one of the resources. Another one is from the Hyperdocs website, and it's searchable by subject area. These would be considered more of their like exemplars, so to speak, as opposed to those that are freely created and given by other teachers, which is awesome. It's teachers give teachers, not teachers pay teachers. So that's kind of cool, all free. So yeah, that's what this one is. And then also for our elementary folks, there's some really good Hyperdocs at this website. It's not a California district, but it's searchable by grade level, which I think is pretty good. And there's some good ones in here also that teachers and the technology integration coach have created. So I think I'm going to give you like, let's say till like 2:45. You can look at these all later as well, but I want to give you until 2:45 to on your own just kind of look through these Hyperdocs, so that when we come back, you may have things that this may help you know what questions to ask. It may help you to ask questions about how you could remix it to work for distance learning, etc. And I think it's going to help as we talk about lesson design in a moment. So go ahead and take some time until 2:45. Please feel free to ask questions in the chat as you are searching and looking at things. And I can certainly answer all of those. So go ahead and take some time to explore those resources. And thank you, Cindy, for writing the prompt on there. It's helpful. Got a few more minutes to explore. There's some great questions on the chat here. Feel free to jump in earlier and ask questions here but if you would like, or continue to explore for the next 6 minutes. I'm not muted right now. About 4 minutes left before we come back together. About 2 more minutes. About a minute left, so be thinking about what, if there are any questions you may have, any trends that you saw that you liked, any wonderings you have about how this would work in your context. And we can use the chat for those questions and noticings. All right, we're gonna go ahead and come back together. So yes, this is a great point. Actually, before we move on to that, I want to say the reason I gave you this explore time, I could have shown you one example of a hyperdoc, maybe a couple, maybe three. But something that someone had mentioned in the chat was there's a lot of different types of templates. There's a lot of different ways that this can be done. And so I thought it was important for you to be able to explore what might be best for your context, whether it's by grade level or by topic or content area, just to truly show you that there's a lot of different ways that these hyperdocs can be created. And so that was kind of the reason that I wanted to give you time to explore that, so you could really see that. So Jason asked a great question about, let's say there's a middle school sibling, but they have 3 or 4 elementary siblings, and that means they have to share time on one Chromebook, and how does that work? And so I'm going to show you an example in a bit that has, you're basically using the Hyperdoc or Hyperslide, whichever you choose to use. That is guiding the learning experience. So it's kind of like steps of things, activities for students to do. That if you think about UDL, like they're accessing content. Hopefully it's, in a way that is accessible. So that's our multiple means of representation. So they're accessing content, and then there's some way that they're going to respond to that content, that multiple means of action expression. So, and we do this again and again and again, and hopefully there's some collaboration in there as well. But as that Hyperdoc or Hyperslide is guiding kids through opportunities to learn and express their learning, they don't all have to be things that are on the device. So, for example, maybe you ask students to watch a video or read an article, but then you ask them to perhaps sketch a model, or in the younger grades, maybe you want them to like make a picture book, right? Just fold a piece of paper if you have one and make a picture book or something. And so you're leading them away from the device sometimes as well. And so I think that, and I'll give you an example of that in a moment, but try to kind of think of that, keep that in mind. I would also say most districts that I've talked to we hear a lot about like schedules and I've seen a lot of sample schedules out on social media. 8 to 8:30 is reading, and 8:30 to 9:45 is science, or whatever, and all these things. And it's like, well, if you've got multiple students in a household and only a limited amount of devices, I would caution away from that. So I think having activities to do and things to accomplish during the day, as opposed to at 8 o'clock you need to do X. So I think particularly in our communities, that may be helpful. And Cindy said something. Yes, absolutely. Printed materials and non-screen activities, as well as the digital, I think is a great way to go. Absolutely. And yes, Cindy says it's not going to reflect a 7-hour day norm, and this is something, this is new territory, and we're all still learning through this. So anything in the chat, if you guys want to chime in, anything else that seems like that may be a barrier, or anything you noticed that you liked about this. Okay, the 5th grade ones were confusing. were they confusing as far as like they will be confusing to kids, or is that what you are referring to, Katie?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So I feel like some of the fifth grade slides, like it'll be a slide,
Uh-huh.
and then it looks like there's all these links, but
Okay.
they're not links. It was just pictures. So I feel
Mm.
like some of that is going to be super, super confusing because I mean, as an adult, I'm sitting here trying to click through, seeing is it going to pop up a video? What's going to happen? So I feel like that's going to be super confusing for the kids.
Yeah, so I did lead you to look at a bunch of examples, but they're not all like exemplars, right? And they're not all super amazing. So I think that you have to be, I'm going to show you an example of something that I created with some fourth grade teachers that I think is a little bit more direct. And so that's certainly something that you want to keep in mind. Hopefully, though, seeing the format of some of these Hyperdocs gives you ideas. And we're going to talk about creating Hyperdocs, but doing it in a simple way that's not super overwhelming. Some included games. Okay, yes, I would agree. Making the links obvious, or even telling kids like, you know, at the top of the slide or at the top of the table where the Hyperdoc is, like, you'll need to click here, or you'll need to look at the picture and answer the question on the next slide, or whatever it happens to be. Being very clear, I think, is really important. You could take some of those parts of those Hyperdocs perhaps and cut and paste them as to make it work better for you. Yes, games grab the attention of young kids. Yeah, you know, find some sort of system, highlighting them in red boxes, mentioning their links, absolutely. Something like that I think is really important. I think that some of these teachers have been using Hyperdocs for so long and their kids know how to know their system, but if this is something new for our students, we have to be a lot more explicit. I would agree, especially because we are doing this at a distance. Yes, agreed, Fidel, break it up by small chunks. Agreed. Okay, so Flor makes a good point. Like, they look really sophisticated and like professional. The ones that I'm going to show you are much more simple, and I still think that they're solid pedagogically. And so I'll kind of show you the process of creating a Hyperdoc and making it look pretty is, I think, one of the even the Hyperdocs ladies say that's the last thing that you would think about. And to be honest, I don't think it's all that important. There are more template slides to let the students create from. Some of them, yeah, some of them for sure. Okay, so this is good to know. So the objective is to have each teacher create a simple standards-based Hyperdoc to use with distance learning or in the classroom next year. Awesome, so time to do that. Yeah, absolutely, I like that. So Fidel saw the explore, explain, apply, create format. Absolutely. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead. If you have other things you wanted to add in the chat, please do. Please do. I want to move on for a moment. Slides on the initial page gave a lot of good information. Okay. Thank you for that. So in looking at those, a lot of you were seeing, you know, I think I need to either remix what they have or make it like a lot more simple. And so we're going to kind of talk about the create section of creating a Hyperdoc or Hyperslide, but doing it in a way that, number one, works for distance learning, and number two is small chunks and things that are a little bit easier for you as an educator. So the Hyperdocs website talks about things that you need to think about when you're going to create a Hyperdoc. So I think that their step one is absolutely the most important thing. Like, you have to know your kids and know what am I teaching? Like, what do I want them to learn, right? And so I think that part's really important. Don't get so caught up in the template that you don't start with the learning goal. So learning goal should always, always, always be first. I mean, that's something I have talked about with you guys for a while about. Technology should never be the goal. The learning goal, the academic learning goal, is always first, and technology is the how. And Hyperdocs are no different. That academic learning goal is key. That is the most important thing here. And the Hyperdocs are just how they engage with the content and how they then show evidence of their learning. So that's the first thing that you would do. So the second step, according to Hyperdocs, is to determine your cycle of learning. So they have these different models, okay? They have explore, explain, apply. Fidel saw that, and if you saw that and you like it, that's cool. They have a workshop model, the 5 E's, which if you are, if you have some knowledge of NGSS, of Next Gen Science Standards, you may be familiar with that, and something called the Hyperdoc model. So those are certainly models that you can go look at if you would like. But I really want us at this time, we're in this spot where we're learning new things and we're teaching in a different way and students are learning in a different way. And so I think it's important that we start small and in chunks, as was talked about. And I think that it's good that we simplify things, but still be pedagogically sound and do what we know is best pedagogical practice. So within the structure of a Hyperdoc, so to speak, an interactive platform that is the how students engage with content and demonstrate their understanding. I was really trying to think about when this all started, how to help teachers have some simple steps to create a distance learning lesson design that is chunked and makes sense and also aligns to UDL, because we've been doing some UDL. So the first step in this is to set the stage, and what that means is letting the kids know what they're going to learn, right? So this is very similar to what we've done in our classrooms, and I think it's also important that we make the connection and we greet them. Maybe we make a welcome video and we show that first. Then is the content, and so that would be whatever they are exploring, whatever hyperlinks to a text set, or maybe a video that you embedded, or some images to look at, whatever that, someone said games, whatever that content is, then giving the kids an opportunity to collaborate. Okay, so, and by the way, the content, that's gonna be your multiple means of representation. So there's the UDL guidelines if you wanted to look at it. I kept the same colors, the purple, green, and blue. So the collaboration is so important because we wanna make sure that kids still feel a connection to us and each other. And so that's where we have like a flip grid, or we go into, allow them to go into Google Classroom and put in, type in some of their learning, or whatever it happens to be, something collaborative, and then they synthesize their learning. And so that in UDL is the part where they have multiple means of action and expression. So this is where they, in some way, give you evidence of what they learned, right? Whether it be that they type a paragraph, or they make an infographic, or they draw something out and cite some evidence on paper as well. So in doing this, just to kind of show you, if you're making this document, right? First thing to do, I think especially important in distance learning, you gotta welcome them, like thank them for engaging and learning with you. I think it's really important. And letting them know, I know someone said in these Hyperdocs looked really confusing. And I think that if that's the case, it's really important that we provide kids with the protocols for what's gonna come. You're gonna be reading some texts and looking at images, and then you're going to be able to go to a flip grid and tell your friends what you're learning, and then you'll be able to write about it in Google Classroom. Like, I think that's really important with this distance learning when you're doing the Hyperdocs, to make sure that you're very clear of what that is. So if possible, it's cool to actually like speak, and you could have something written as well, but to actually like make a video of yourself doing this, talking through it, because it's really helpful for our kids to see our faces. So if possible, that would be great. If not, at least write something out, I think that's really important. So let's see. So then we have our content. So like you welcomed everyone, you said this is what we're doing today. Here's some stuff. Here's the interaction where you get to go in and explore some content. Okay, so things that you have either found on a Hyperdoc and linked into a new one, or things that, and I'll show you some ways that you can find some resources, but that's where you do that, right? And then next is the opportunity to collaborate. So again, that can be in like a Flipgrid, it can be in, you know, Google Classroom, things like that. Because we know research shows that as students engage with content together in a social experience, they're going to sustain that learning a lot better and build on each other's ideas. And then of course, synthesizing their learning. So now how am I actually gonna have them show what they learned? So those kind of like 4 steps, I think if you think through those, it can be helpful in creating a more simplified, smaller chunk learning experience for students during this time. And I want to give you an example. So this is something that a 2nd grade teacher in another district, a 2nd grade teacher had created this learning experience for her students in a regular classroom. So unlike a lot of those Hyperdocs and Hyper Slides, does it look really complicated? It's a lot more simple, right? And it kind of tells kids what to do. So all I did was add a couple of things to make it work better for a distance learning environment. So first, we're setting the stage. So at that very first slide where there's like a YouTube, for example, of the teacher explaining what's going to happen and saying hello, that part was not on the original slide deck that this teacher created, because guess what? She's going to do that in front of the class. Hey, boys and girls, I'm so glad you're here. You're back from recess. That's great. We're going to learn about Arctic animals. It's going to be awesome. You don't have the opportunity to do that. They're not all with you at the same time. And so this way, you can show a video first. So that's that set the stage part. She also says, though, watch the video and fill out the slides. Like, this is pretty clear. You know, it's telling you what to do. Then is the content. So for this particular one, she had a video that they were watching. Now, if we think of the next stage being, oh, Katie, good. I'm glad it's much more user-friendly. Those Hyperdocs are like, I think it's people that really like making all these really pretty, sometimes it's even like overwhelming to look at. So anyway, but the concepts are strong. So anyway, the collaboration part, this is the slide I added to the 2nd grade teacher's example, because in a classroom, you can say, okay, I want you to talk to a friend about what you learned from the video. We can't really do that in a distance learning environment face to face. And so if you link to a Flipgrid, then they can have that conversation there. It could also be, comments in Google Classroom or something like that. And then the synthesizing the learning, this I didn't change at all. The 2nd grade teacher had it this way. Type 3 facts you learned. And you'll see, like, she has an arrow that says type. Like, this is exactly where you're going to type. It's not like the Hyperdocs where it's kind of like some of them that you saw, not all, that may be a little tricky on where to click and such. And then type 1 question you have, and then add pictures of Arctic animals that go with the video. So that's just kind of an example of, more simple chunks. As kids start learning this process, you can start making it more complex. You can make it a little bit longer. But I think it's important in this time that you and the students start building some protocols like this. And you can see this is something you can do in a regular classroom too. Like, we took this and just added a couple things to make it work better for distance learning. So hopefully that's helpful to you. I have a link to this on my website. I have a new remote distance learning page, and I'm building like lesson examples. And so if you like this particular one, go ahead and on that remote learning page, look at the lesson examples, and there's like a Google Drive with some examples, and there's a link to this. So if you like it, if not, it's cool too. But I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of what that was.
I have a question.
Please.
So looking at that, is this like Google Slides? Is that what the
Oh,
kids are
yes.
looking at here? Yeah, okay.
Good question. Yeah. So in Google Slides, you can look at it. What we normally see is like the big one in the middle that we're actually looking at, and you see the stuff on the side. This is slide 1, slide 2, slide 3, slide 4.
Okay.
You can click for a different view, and it was just easier for people to see. So yeah,
Okay.
these are all Google Slides. So you would
Okay.
send this to the students in Google Classroom and say, make a copy for each student. Excellent question.
Thank you.
Sure. All right. Thank you for those that are sending the link again, for those that are asking.
So I just wanted to talk about what I had written a message about earlier.
Okay.
We didn't actually get it approved until this morning. We had a curriculum meeting and talked about the PD calendar. And as a team, you know, we came to the consensus that this would be a great start. I know some people are very proficient already in Hyperdocs, and some people are not proficient at all. I've only taken your training one time during a PD, and it was wonderful. I learned a lot, but I didn't actually put it into practice. So what we wanted to do is have, I just wanted to make the objective clear, because I wrote it in the chat and we didn't talk about it before because I missed the first few minutes and I wasn't sure if Cindy had discussed it. But by Friday, what we would like to do is have each teacher try to make a Hyperdoc, and you can use this for distance learning, or if you're in a primary grade and you feel like they just wouldn't get it without support, then you can make it for use in your classroom, you know, maybe even more for the middle of the year, if you teach kindergarten. And thinking about that, you know, just coming up with a very simple Hyperdoc that you can use just to give us that practice and just put a little more professional development time into this assignment. So I do have a whole calendar that's going to come out that shows exactly what we'll be doing, but we just kind of approved it and discussed it this morning. But this is one thing we want to do by Friday, is to have everybody actually create a Hyperdoc. And we'll have a little time on Wednesday also to work on it collaboratively.
Thank you for that clarification. That's very helpful. And I'm glad that hopefully this after looking at all of those Hyperdocs that are already created, I'm hoping that these seem a lot more doable, something like this. I'm going to show you another example as well, because this is for that distance learning, like a very clear set the stage, content, collaborate, synthesize learning. Like there's just 4 steps, right? And I think that there's other ways that we could do this as well. Actually, before I get to that. So we were talking about what Hyperdocs says is the steps for making a Hyperdoc. So their first step was determining the objectives. What do you want to teach? What do you want kids to learn? And then that cycle of learning. And so I'd said you could use this if you prefer for distance learning. Next step is going to be packaging. So thinking about what Google app do I want to use? Do I want to use Docs? Do I want to use Slides, Maps? Do I want it a website? And why? And so you'll see that this is step 3, not step 1. So step 1 is not, I want to make a Hyperdoc. I mean, it is true that our objective as a district, as teachers, is to make a Hyperdoc. However, as you're thinking of creating this Hyperdoc, you don't start with, am I going to use Docs or Slides? You start with, what do I want students to learn, before you then get into the packaging. So just make sure that you have that mindset. And then once you do determine that packaging, Docs, Slides, sites, etc., what's that going to look like? How are you going to push it out? How are you going to collect work? How are you going to provide feedback? And, you know, I would say that Google Classroom is probably the best at this point. You may also use this process to consider some screen-free activities if you are in elementary as well. So someone said, does anyone else have audio and no video? I think people are seeing video. I see it on my other screen, so not quite sure what's happening. So the next step, and this is the final step, is the design. Page color, font, images, customized links, table properties, merge cells, etc. And this is the part where some of you were like, whoa, these people like look like they've been making Hyperdocs for forever, and they have all these pictures and all these like clip art and all that stuff. As you saw in that other example, I don't believe that's that important. And even Hyperdocs ladies say that's the very last thing to think about. And so I think that's pretty important to know as well, is that your students don't care how pretty it is. Your students care that it came from you. What's really important is that they know my teacher made this for us, not, wow, that looks really cool, like someone professional made it. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so here's another example. This was made with some 4th grade teachers, and just as Katie had mentioned that some of the Hyperdocs she looked at weren't too clear, we really try to make this very clear because it was their first year with Chromebooks. And so that's something that was kind of a goal. And this is a little bit of an this was done before distance learning, but it's something that I think will work as well. I took out a couple slides, but it's the same concept. And so this one is going to have a little bit more opportunities for interaction within slides. So, you know, you're going to send these next slides to your students, make a copy for each student. Perhaps if you're at the elementary, perhaps you'll have some of this kind of, this process in a packet, right? So maybe you will, for example, and it says follow the directions on each slide, right? So here's a video, watch the video and respond on slide 3. So maybe for elementary, instead of a video, you have some pictures and a little bit of text, and that's on one page, and then you say respond on the next page or whatever it happens to be. Same concept. I get some content and I respond. So here's my response, you know, based on the video, provide your opinion to this question, was the gold rush worth it? So the first slide, I kind of like slides because you can embed YouTube videos in slides very easily. To do it in docs, there's like a whole hack and it's a big mess and it takes a while. And so I think that if you want to put videos in there, then slides is probably going to be the way you're going to want to go. Is simple history a passable source for the slides? I am myself am not familiar with simple history, but I am going to give you places to find a bunch of content to put into your slides or docs. So I will get to that. And that was information that was vetted from all of the content area, from the content teams at ERS. So I will show you that in a bit. Okay. So here's another one. And this is what I was talking a little bit about. Make sure that there's screen-free stuff too. So this is a slide that is digital that is telling kids to draw a picture, right? Clearly, you couldn't do this in a distance learning format if they had never seen pictures of routes to California. Like, this is something that those teachers had already gone over. But I wanted to include it only to show you that you can use the digital means to tell kids to go outside in, you know, kindergarten, like go outside and find something that's living and draw a picture of it, right? Like, even if even if you do get to the point where you have something digitally you're sending to them, there could be a slide that tells them to do that. And so keeping in mind that screen-free is important as well. Okay. Yeah, I can't answer Alexander about simple history. I myself am not familiar enough about that. So wish I could answer that. Did someone have something they wanted to add? I hear someone. Perhaps not. Okay. So here's another one, like based on the picture. So there's a picture. Answer the Flipgrid response. If you could ask these prospectors any 2 questions about their lives, what would they be? So, you know, again, click here to respond. I like to be real clear. Click here, right? So that can I think be helpful. So if you've been using technology in your class a lot and your kids are used to Easter eggs, like they're used to the fact that you make pictures clickable sometimes and all that stuff, like that's fine. And Katie, to be honest, when you saw those other Hyperdocs that had a lot of pictures you thought they were clickable, but then they weren't. Like that teacher probably has taught his or her students a certain way that they create those Hyperdocs. But for now, in the environment we're in, clarity and simplicity is super important. This one, click here, and it takes them to an article, right? And then write a summary of what you read. So just kind of another idea about that. I had told you that I would show you where there are there's some content for your Hyperdocs, Hyperslides. So on the bottom is the distance learning resources home that was created by ERS. And so there were, it takes you to here. It doesn't take you to the home page. Well, if you go to the home page, you'll see there's all the grade levels, right? And these have been, this site was designed, the team from ERS wanted it to be simple and to have quality over quantity. So if you go to first grade, for example, and you go to say mathematics, okay? So every grade level page and then content is going to have 3 to, this one has 6, but not like 20 highlighted resources. And so the consultants are saying, we think these are some of the best. Now this is designed for educators and families, so keep that in mind, but they have been vetted by consultants for this time. And then there's some additional resources. And then what I really like is the team thought it was really important to also have some screen-free resources. So every single grade level and content area is going to have screen-free stuff as well. And so particularly for the elementary teachers, this can be really helpful. So I wanted to kind of show you that. There's also for educators portion of the site that has some distance learning stuff. Oh, that went to digital citizenship. Whoops. I think I clicked the wrong one. So tech dependent versus non-tech dependent, so that you can kind of get some tips on just how to design distance learning. And then, so that's the ERS site. This is a slide deck I had created like 2 years ago, but it has a lot of different links for digital resources, including Hyperdocs actually. And there's some ERS, it tells a little bit more about some of the ERS resources and what they are good for as well. And then this one is a link to a document I created with that lesson design concept, but like tech tools and or content resources that would go into those sections. So I wanted to give you those resources so that as you are designing this, go to whichever ones you think will work best for you, so to speak. But, I did see a couple of questions of, well, that's great, but like, where am I going to get all this content? And so hopefully this will help you in that. So yeah, that's kind of that. Those of you, if you are using Google Classroom for this, if you're a middle school teacher or you're elementary who, I don't know what your guys' protocols are, so I won't speak to that. But if you are not familiar with how to create an assignment and add a Hyperdoc, here's how to do that. And yeah, so I know you guys use Google Classroom as well at the elementary. I just didn't know if you were all doing that, or I will say CDE has said that, and we have it on, I have it on the distance learning portion of the TCOE ERS website, but CDE has stated that not all, it is considered equitable to CDE for not all students to engage in learning using the same methods. So in other words, if some students have access to technology, some of those elementary school students, and you send things through Google Classroom and others have packets, that is acceptable according to CDE at this time. That came out March 17th. So anyway, and then if you did do the make a copy for each student, if you were doing that kind of a Hyperdoc, Hyperslide, some of you have been doing screencasting already. And so if you have and your students are comfortable with it, this would probably be largely middle school. They can make a screencast, right? And then they could, in a create question, like they can share their link in there, and then they can watch each other's screencasts. So that's kind of like a next step thing. If your students haven't done this yet, during this distance learning time, probably not the best time to have them do that, because they may get frustrated not understanding the process of using the tech tool. But if you have, I know that some of you are using it a lot, and so I wanted to include it just in case there were those that had to do that. And then this is how, if you wanted to do the create question, ooh, this is an old video because it's on the right there. But anyway, I have to replace that with another one. Are there any clarifications that administration wanted to make based on what we talked about, and or questions for either me or for administration regarding the process, next steps, etc.? I'm going to stop sharing my screen, I think. And you can ask questions on the chat, or I suppose unmiking if you'd like.
So Jason Araki had asked if we could have a little more time, because originally we had asked that these were shared on Friday, but considering that everybody's busy making packets and just busy in general, then we'll go ahead and make it April 17th, I think I put on there, because that'll give just a little more time for you to explore. We're just trying to present these just to give you some more ideas on how you can work on distance learning with your kids, but also just to put in some very, I guess, valuable PD time so that everyone can continue to learn and grow while we're at home.
And as you are working on these, please feel free to reach out. I am available to, I mean, as schedules allow, especially if I know ahead of time. I am able to like join a PLC on a Zoom call, or, you know, answer questions via email or whatever it happens to be. So please feel free to reach out if that would be helpful, in whatever way is most comfortable for you, whether it's email or you want to have a phone call, or you want me to jump in on a Zoom call with you and your team, or you want me to even just like look over what you have and give some feedback. Just share it, that, you know, share the docs or slides. That's fine with me as well. You know, I want to be able to support as much as possible, especially in this time. And because at this time I'm not able to physically be at your district, I still want to be available and visible. So certainly, even if you wanted to like have me as a co-teacher to kind of sometimes teachers will invite me to their Google Classroom to help like troubleshoot. That's fine with me as well. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone knows that those are certainly things that you can reach out and request if that would be helpful for you.
I have a question. Can you show on your screen, I don't know if this would be helpful to everyone, how to insert a YouTube video?
It cut out a bit, but I think you're asking me to show people how to insert a YouTube video into Google Slides. Is that correct?
I'm getting bad reception. I have to move.
If you turn off your video, that'll probably help too. We'll just hear you.
Okay. Yeah. I'm gonna walk in a different room.
Okay. Understood.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So, can you show us how to put, you know how sometimes when you're on a slide, it will show a picture of the actual video, and
Yes.
then they click on it instead of just showing the link? I
Right.
forget how to do that.
Sure. And that's going to be a lot easier for kids because they see that video and they see the play button. They know what that means. Like they could be 3 years old and they're probably going to know. So yeah, let me share my screen and show you that.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. So let me just start a new slide deck real quick. Oh, come on. There we go. And like I said, that's why I like slides better than docs. It's one reason, because I think that it's cool that you can embed that YouTube video. I will also say, I think Dina had asked the question if that example I showed was Google Slides. This is how I saw it. So down here, you'll see that I'm in this view, but if I went here, well, let me make some new slides first. So you don't, that's not what I meant to do. 1 second. So if I make some new slides, whatever. Okay. So if I choose this button here on the bottom left instead of this one, then I have that grid view. So that's what you guys were looking at earlier. If I want to put in a YouTube video, I'm going to click. There's a couple different ways to do it. Maybe you already know what video you want and you'll search for it and you'll find it right away. So you'd go insert video and you're searching YouTube. So maybe you know that the name of the video happens to be like biology for kids. And so you know, oh yes, that's the exact video I want. So then you'd click it and you would select. And it's going to show up here. The other cool thing about this is that if you wanted to, you can change the time that it starts and ends. So like this is a 36-minute video, but maybe I wanted it to start at 2 minutes and end at 6:16. So now when the kids play it, see how it's starting. We don't need to hear that. But you see how it started at 2 minutes and it's going to end at 6. Now the kids can still like click before and after to see it, but when they click to play it, they're going to be prompted to just that first portion. Most kids are not, maybe they want, if you want, maybe they will watch the whole video, but it helps you to kind of shorten it if you'd like. The other way is, let's say that I had a YouTube video that I already knew of. So biology for kids, whatever. Biology crash course. That's a good one. So I found this video.
If you're wondering.
And I say, I'm on YouTube, I'm searching videos, I find one I like. So then I'm going to click the button here that says share. And it's going to give me a link. And I copy it. So now, when I go back and I go insert video, I'm not searching, I'm going by URL because a URL is the website address and I just copied the website address. And so it'll be here like this. Now I click it, now I select, and there it is. Okay. So will the YouTube videos have ads? So it used to be I never saw ads ever, but if there is I'm not sure if you guys have ad blocker as an extension, but even if you don't, if you play the video, like I'm gonna play this video and I look through the whole thing and no ads show up, I'm gonna be fine, okay? Because this is a video that doesn't have ads to begin with. If there's a video, however, which usually are more commercial, maybe not as educational, that does have ads, then those will show up. So if you choose videos that don't have ads when you view them on YouTube, they're not going to have ads when you put them on here. This didn't used to happen where there were the more videos feature when you insert it into slides, and now it is. This is still here. So you may want to look at that before you send it to kids to make sure that it's all like educational. Usually they are, because they're about the same type of stuff. This is all from the exact same YouTube channel, but it is something to be aware of, to check first. Can we build grade level docs to all use and share, or do they have to be individual? I don't have an answer to that, but I will say it would make sense to me that anything that, even if you are doing individual docs, it would be nice to share because then you have more, so doing something different. But that's a Dina question. Oh, Dina answered it right here. My apologies. She said basically it's kind of the same thing I did. So yeah, an individual lesson, but jigsaw unit and collaborate. I think that'd be great. Then you're going to have so much more created already. Okay, that's good. So you'll all be able to create a hyperdoc. The slide I created with the video, is it considered a hyperdoc? So that's an interesting question. Like, I mean, if you look at the definition of hyperdoc, right, so to speak, it's transformative and interactive. So essentially, in order to make it interactive, I would have to have them not just watch the video, but actually respond. So maybe on the next slide, I would have to ask them to do something and to show their learning in some way. Ideally, hyperdocs are also, if you look here, they also encourage creation and collaboration. And so in a classroom where students are there physically, that collaboration may be face-to-face, it may be in a group, it may be that I'm putting a Post-it on a map, and then, or what I notice is gonna go on the wall, like on a chart that has some text, you know, like a chart paper with text pasted on it, and then my friend's gonna go and add to what I said or whatever. So in a distance learning environment, that's where like Flipgrid or the Create Question Google Docs comes in. So, I mean, to be a true like hyperdoc, so to speak, it has to be interactive and collaborative, I'd say would be like the big things to include. And if admin has something in addition or different that they want to add in, please do. I also, anyone want to talk? If not, I can move on. I have something else to say. Okay. I also have to answer, I just showed you how to insert a YouTube video into a slide, but I can also, I have a video that tells you how to do that. And so I can add that to this slide deck as well. And Dina had a clarification. While I'm looking for that, do you want to speak to your comments?
Yes. Well, does anybody have a question about what we've specified so far? Trying to get back to my.
I have a question.
Sure.
The hyperdoc that we create, is it something that we're going to share with like someone in specifically, or we're going to add it to our packets? Going to show it on Google like Classroom, like once we're done?
Oh, you mean once you're done? Well, you know, it's just basically to gain some experience and just to use what we've learned today. And that hopefully, you know, you'll expand on that and use it in your classroom. But no, on April 17th, we'll just ask, we were saying Friday, but I know you guys have a lot going. And then the next week, we want you to take a break on Easter. So April 17th, I believe, we would have that due on that Friday. So you would just turn it into your site principals, just submit it to the site principal. if that was your question, if I understood you correctly.
Yes.
So I had another question, good question, from Mrs. Heger about how to add Flipgrid to the slide deck. Great question. So I don't have a video for that. Maybe I should make one. I'm going to make myself a note. Then I'll add that to my YouTube channel. Video, add Flipgrid to slide deck. Okay, but let me show you right now as well. So what I basically did, let's say I have one over here. My screen's still shared, yes. So I have a Flipgrid here. And so I'd already created the Flipgrid, right? And so to share it, and I have to go to myself as a teacher. So educator login. When it stops thinking, here it goes, almost. So let's say I look at this one and I go to the actual topic, because I don't want to, especially the young kids, I don't want to send them the entire grid so they see like the grid is like the classroom, if you think Google Classroom, and the topics are like assignments. And I don't want to send them a copy of the grid because they see all the assignments. I like to just send them the one we're working on right then. So there's a share button here. And that share button, you can just copy it right there. And when I go back to my slide, what I like to do is insert an image of Flipgrid. See if it shows up here. No, it didn't. I have to steal it from over here. So I put in a Flipgrid logo, and I go to images. Here's one. And then you can make any image. You could either like have the logo. You don't have to have the logo. I just think it's kind of nice looking. But you could just type out like click here to add your thoughts on Flipgrid or whatever. So you're telling them click here. And then when you highlight it and you go to the links up here, that's where you'll paste in. I lost it. Let me paste it again. Share, copy it, and that's where you'll paste it, what you'll paste in there. There we go. So if you're, you could certainly send them the Flipgrid link in Google Classroom, but the cool thing about doing it all in like Google Slides or Google Docs is they are using this one document or this one slide deck like for that lesson, so they don't have to go back and forth to look at Google Classroom, look back at, it's all accessible right there. So I think it's nice to have it accessed right there. Again, I'm going to make a video explaining that. So that'll be on my channel, but I can join your, planning times as well, if that's helpful. Let's see. So can all students in the grade level use your Flipgrid? If you invited all of the students in your grade level to use that Flipgrid, you could do that, but all the videos of all the kids would be in there, which you may or may not want. So it's up to you if you want to open it up to putting all those kids, having all those kids join that particular Flipgrid because all the videos would be in one place, or if you want to have them just kind of make their own per class. And then, so the question was, if this works and we want to use the Hyperdoc or Hyperslide we make, can we use it now or do we have to use it next year? I think the answer was, especially if, because the middle school all has devices, I think the answer was yes. Oh yeah, she already answered, perfect. Yes, these are great for distance learning. Awesome. Okay. Excellent. Any other, and I added onto the very last slide of this presentation, I added the video about how to insert a YouTube video into Google Slides. Because I know that I may have gone a little fast. And with the Flipgrid question, I will make a video of that as well. And I'm gonna add it to this slide deck also. So when you guys open it up again, you'll have to refresh, it'll be there. I'll do it sometime today or tomorrow. So it'll be there pretty soon. Any further questions or clarifications? So Amy has a question for Dina. Is there a certain subject requested or any subject?
I think any subject, because it's more to practice and just put into place the skills that we've learned today. Of course, we want it to be useful, so however you'd like to use it in whichever subject area.
Cindy, did you have anything else to add?
No, I think you've been pretty thorough. If you have more questions regarding how to create these Hyperdocs, again, I think Kat, she said she's available. I'm available to help, Dina as well. I know some of you have the Google certification. I know Mr. Lee, congratulations, you just received that. So I know that he's probably another go-to person.
Oh yeah.
Get support from, and anyone else that is very familiar with Hyperdocs. If you are available to help, again, thank you, Kat. I know that this may have seemed like a lot of information for some of us, and that's okay. It's just another opportunity for us to continue refining our own craft and being able to grow and learn from the different resources and platforms that are available for us and our students as well. So thank you, everyone. If you don't have any more questions, I will be downloading the script from our chat today to have that accessible for everyone, the video as well, and I'll send that out to whoever may need it.
And then Cindy, did everyone sign in on the sign-in sheet? I just wanted to make sure. I noticed the sign-in sheet on our docs.
Yes, thank you for reminding me. What I'll do is I will share the link in there again. And if you have not yet signed in, then please go ahead and do so. There's the link one more time.
None of that coughing nonsense.
It's allergies, I promise. But I'm quarantined anyway, so
Right.
I don't even go to the grocery store. I have it brought to me. It is an awful time to have allergies because you are afraid you're gonna like scare people if you go anywhere.
Before we took off for quarantine, some of my kids would cough, and I'm like, it's okay. I'm not doing anything wrong. Just cover up.
Very well. Yeah, exactly. Agreed. Well, I want to thank everyone. As Cindy said, I know that some of you are experts at this already, or have or feel like, oh, okay, this is just like one more step in something that I already am pretty familiar with. Others of you, this is brand new. And so that's why I really wanted to give a few different options. I wanted to provide some places for you to go if you want to look at the next level, all those Hyperdocs that are already kind of created, to get ideas in creating, like leveling up the ones you already have made. And then also the more simple, but still pedagogically sound examples for those that this is new, and that's okay. So certainly, like I said, feel free to email me or reach out if you would like any support.
Thank you, Kat.
Thank you, Kat.
Certainly.